We have the enormous pleasure and honor to host High Representative and Vice President Josep Borrell for our last keynote. This conversation is going to be led by Marie Vandendriessche. Marie is our senior researcher here at the Esade Center, specialized in energy and climate, and she is also the project coordinator of Engage. So without further ado, Marie, the floor is yours. Thank you, High Representative.
Thank you, Angel, and welcome, Mr. High Representative. We are truly delighted to have you here with us. It is such an honor that you could join us today for the closing remarks of our conference in such a busy diplomatic week. So thank you again for joining us today. So just to give a little bit of context here, you are joining a full day of discussions. We have had over 400 registered listeners today in the context of the Engage project, which is a consortium of 9 universities and 4 think tanks dedicated to thinking about the EU can become a stronger global actor. And so we started out the day today with a keynote speech by Javier Solana, followed by Rosa Balfour, highlighting the different challenges, both internal and external, the EU is facing. We had a first panel on security challenges, on the EU's role in multilateralism, and on the politics of the EU's external action. And a second panel focusing on instruments, capabilities, and options towards a joint European security and defense. So we're really delighted you were able to join to get your high-level perspective on many of the questions that have arisen today. And we'd really like to take these forward as we work on this project. So in this short conversation, I know that we're sandwiched in between many important meetings. We'd like to just step back a little bit and take a longer-term perspective. So if you'll allow me, I'd like to thank you once again for joining us and to start off with a question about challenges and priorities, which is an issue that's come up multiple times today. So the world today is very different from the one, of course, a couple of decades ago when the Union's common foreign and security policy was formally established. And this new global panorama poses many challenges to the EU. But which issues do you believe the Union should place at the top of its priority list?
Well, congratulations of this initiative. It's great to have 13 European think tanks and research institutes working together on how to make the European Union foreign policy work better. We need certainly intellectual support, which later has to be implemented. So it needs to be policy oriented in order for the decision makers, the real life, to use it. But I have always been very much engaged on bridging the academia and people who have time to think with the policymakers, people that they only have time to act. And your help, your intellectual help should be very valuable if it is rightly oriented. Well, on your specific questions, let's try to summarize. 3 points. The most striking thing about the world today is speed and scope of change. Well, it's a cliche to say that pandemic has accelerated history, but the real question is, history has been accelerated. Is our response keeping pace with this change on the speed? And my friend Solana once said, speed and time in politics is relative. Well, in physical life also, but in politics, if you go slower than the speed of change around you, then in real terms, you are going backwards. And I am very much worried because I think that in some issues, we are going backwards. We don't keep the speed of change around us. The speed also makes more difficult to deal with a growing number of crises and challenges at the same time. This is a new reality, particularly as many of our tools and institutions come from the last century, centralized and hierarchical. And we lack the agility, and here in the European Union, I can tell you about the hierarchy. So here we feel that the lack of agility to be active on different fronts at the same time. I'm not sure that we are doing fast enough what our citizens ask us to do, namely to build the European Union into a real global player. This is what the citizens want the European Union to be, a real global player. And if you look at the opinion polls, citizens are ahead of policymakers. The number of European citizens supporting a strong European role in the world has always been quite high because it's quite intuitive that altogether we perform better, but now it's about 80%. The public is well aware that in a world of threats and power politics, Europeans need to stick together. So my first message is to underline a sense of urgency that I feel here every day. We need to go faster. I have the feeling of going backwards because we don't go fast enough. In terms of policy priorities, well, I confess it's hard to give clear answers. A lot of foreign policy is about responding to crisis and can break out anywhere. But if we want to be strategic, we have to get ahead of events and to shape them, not to just respond. Not just respond to the last crisis that knocks at our door. So let me mention two priorities. Well, the first priority is certainly the neighborhood. The most striking aspects here is the degree to which our neighborhood has become crowded. Many actors. When I came here, Russia and Turkey, they were not in Libya. And Russia was just starting putting their foot on the ground in Central African Republic. Russia and Turkey has come, they are very competitive, and many others, but some others, which they don't need to be with the foot on the ground because they're using hybrid tactics. At the same time, the demands for people in the neighborhood for more European Union engagement is strong, and always has been strong. They want more Europe. They want more from Europe. They want us to deliver, once again, faster and better. Because our model, our European model of democracy, solidarity, freedoms, fundamental rights, are tremendously attractive, tremendously powerful. And we must continue to work with anyone that shares that vision and aspires to our value. We should be happy that people would like to live as we Europeans live. That means, for instance, keeping our engagement with the Western Balkans and keeping the whole region on a European path. And once again, we are not doing that very quickly. Next Monday in Luxembourg, we will have the Intergovernmental Conference, and there's not going to be any speed up on the election process by Serbia, for example. And a couple of days ago, we had the reviving of the Serbia-Kosovo dialogue with the new Prime Minister of Kosovo. And the least I can say is that it was very emotional. And we have to revive this dialogue and to overcome the devils of the past if we want to bring stability to the region. This also means supporting Ukraine when it faces Russian aggression. Let's use the right words, Russian aggression. And at the same time to implement the reform agenda, because without implementing the reform agenda, Ukraine will first not be able to face the pressure from the eastern border, and secondly, will not get closer to the European Union. This also means continuing to put pressure on the regime in Belarus for the stolen elections and what's happening later with the Ryanair flight. That means supporting Libya and its new national unity government. On Wednesday, we are going to have the Libya conference in Berlin. The ceasefire is lasting more than ever, but it's also weak and fragile, and it can break down at any moment. Libya, it's from the economic point of view, financial point of view, it's in a very difficult situation. And we need to support this government because people can believe that, well, after all, war was not so bad if peace doesn't deliver from the everyday life. So my second message is that as European Union, we collectively need to step up in the neighborhood by demanding and by offering both. The agenda is vast, and I hope this consortium can come up with new ideas, especially on how to enhance the Mediterranean partnership. And my third priority is at the global level and relates to our strategic positioning and narrative. I'm giving more and more importance to this word, narrative. We are in a battle of narrative. We are in a battle of storytellers. And clearly there is an increasing global struggle in this battle of narrative. People asking themselves which system is better at delivering for their citizens, especially in Africa, where there is a competition with China, who is, and now Russia, but mainly China. And we will see with the vaccines who is, at the end of the day, the one who provides vaccines to the need of the people. In Africa, 1%, less than 2% of people has been vaccinated. The figures are fuzzy, but less than 2% for sure, compared with a much higher rate in the Western world. And the Africans will remember who provided vaccines to them. And the same thing will happen with Latin America. And our future influence will be determined by our current capacity, not to announce, but to deliver. Not to announce for things that will happen 3 years from now, but to deliver next week. And then we see fights over technology. Technology and trade are the key words that were very much used during the past summit with the US. Technology and trade. We decided to create a Technology and Trade Council, US, because these two words will go more hand in hand. Technological developments will define standards, and we will use trade in order to develop more our influence based on our technological capacities. And when we go to the field of defense, technology and trade will be limited by security issues. Which standards are going to apply? Who will master certain technologies? On which values this technology will be based? Remember that who writes the technological rules rule the world. And as I said before, which societal model will Africa choose? What about Latin America? What about the Indo-Pacific area, which is already the center of gravity of today's world? Will it be remaining open and rules-based? We have to have a clear position here about our narrative. We have many like-minded partners who share our values. We find them in the G7, many places too. And happily, with the new US administration, the transatlantic mood has completely changed. And I can tell you that the Biden visit to Brussels, the first visit of an American president on the last 6 years, has evidenced the deep change on the atmosphere between US and EU. On the other hand, authoritarian countries are becoming more assertive, and democratic countries are pulling more together. But there are many countries who do not want the world splitting in two camps again. And we don't want the world splitting in two camps again. With economic decoupling and a balkanized internet. New worlds, the new world, the world of the future, will not be done on stone. They will be balkanizing internet. And this world will be very, very damaging. It's obvious that issues like climate change and pandemics require collaboration with China and other countries. They don't share our core values. No, they are not multi-party political system with competition among different political offers. For sure not. they control the economy, but in spite of that, we have to talk with them. Because if not, we are not going to solve the global issues, starting with climate change and continuing with pandemic, international terrorism, migration, and so many. Okay, getting this balance right will occupy us for the years to come.
Thank you so much. I can only imagine the balancing act. So thank you so much for these messages, which we will carry forward. So I've noted down the urgency, the neighborhoods, and particularly we do have part of the project working on the neighborhoods. So I'm sure they've taken particular notes of your comments. And as well, the battle of the narratives, which brings us back to the urgency when it comes to the vaccine part of things. So these are wonderful notions. Thank you so much for adding them. Let me bring us now to a second point, which is related in some way. So we've been talking about priorities and how difficult it is to set them with this plethora of threats and conflicts, et cetera, et cetera. Yet in a way, you might argue that it's necessary to have a common orientation among member states at the very least, if we plan to become a stronger global actor. Right? And so the question is, how do the EU and its member states see the global context and the security threats it poses today and the next 10, 20, or 30 years? And how important is a global threat analysis or assessment? How can a consensus be constructed without ending up with the lowest common denominator? So if you could offer your thoughts on this kind of common threat analysis or assessment among the member states and the processes, of course, that are currently ongoing around that. Thank you.
Well, you put me difficult questions. The European Union has a mission to become a stronger global actor. Well, that's what my letter of mission tells me. You have to make Europe a stronger global actor. But in order to act in the world, certainly we need a common orientation. And this orientation is being provided by the European Union Council, by the heads of state and government. Because you know this is not a state. This is an association of states which keep the foreign policy as its own prerogative, exclusive competence. And each one of them perceive threats in a different way, and it's understandable. If you were in Riga, you will not see the world exactly in the same way that if we were in Lisbon. You will not perceive the threats equally. So the first thing to do is to try to perceive threats, security threats today, and to try to make a prospects approach on how these threats will be in the next years, 10, 20 years. That's why it's so important to have a common threat analysis. And how can consensus be constructed without ending up, as you have said, you have in mind, the empty set, no? We agree on the content of the empty set. I'm trying to avoid that. I don't agree with these statements or positions taken by unanimity defining nothing. I prefer to have positions which are not shared by all member states, but at least they define a strong position. In order to overcome this, we need a common strategic culture in Europe. We don't have it. We don't have it. And since we don't have a common strategic culture, it's difficult to reach common decisions. Don't ask peers to the apple tree. If you want to produce a foreign policy that is being shared by member states, these member states have to share a common understanding of the world. And look the other day about China, about Hong Kong. One member state refused to be part of an agreement about Hong Kong. And it was not a matter of nuance, of take me this word and put this other one. No, no, it was an issue of radical and differentiated position. I don't agree with you standing against China. I don't want to be against China. I don't want to say anything that could bother China. Well, how can you build a common foreign policy? Black and white, you cannot mix in a gray. So we have to make possible to share a common understanding of the world. And what answers you will give? Today, these answers depend on the history and geography. No? Geography, I want to share the two parts of the world. And this is very much clear about Russia. As I said, people in Portugal and Spain look at Russia much more different than the Baltics or the Central Europe, who have fresh memories of Soviet occupation and terror. I presented to the college yesterday a communication about the EU relation with Russia. And I can tell you the commissioners presented different positions which are very much related with a different geographical position, because geography has to see with the memories, and the Baltic or Central Europe, they have a different memory about what the Soviet occupation meant. The same thing happens about the US or China. If you were German, that big trade surplus with China, they are one of the few European Union countries to have a surplus with China. Not every other has a surplus with China. Very few have it. You will look at China a different way. It matters if, because of austerity or other economic reasons, you think that you are dependent on Chinese investment. You think that you are dependent on Chinese investment, or if, like many Nordic countries and the Benelux, you have been on the receiving end of Chinese cyber operations and concerned about the integrity of your 5G networks. It's not all about the economy, it's also about security. Let's take Turkey, it's the same. It matters. It matters if you were in Greece and Cyprus, you are at the front line and have an acute sense of Turkish threats and provocations and even occupations. You are Sweden or the Netherlands, and you may see Turkey more through the angle of migration. It's a wall against migration. And the role of Turkey is playing in keeping Syrian refugees on its territory. Not to mention the influence that many have on citizens of Turkish origin in their country. Member states start thinking on political terms about how many Turks vote, citizens of Turkish origin are participating in the vote. So external events are affecting internal events. The point is we need to invest in a common threat assessment and a common strategic culture. This is what we work on, this strategic compass. I am afraid it takes too long to discussion. We are lagging for several months, and it should not be so difficult, but it is difficult for the reason I mentioned before. But we have to put on a paper a strategic approach on what we share and what we don't share. And I think its work is driving us on the future of European defense cooperation. We did a threat analysis last year, but it was not enough. We need to do more and more and more together. Once again, you know, we need to be more flexible and faster when taking decisions. It takes us 6 months to decide to send a training military mission to Mozambique. And you know, the situation in Mozambique in 6 months can be radically different, and the jihadists cannot occupy the north of the country. We can, too late. We must invest in more technologies and capabilities together. We have to be ready to deploy forces faster in crisis zones. And if we want to be a security provider, at the European way of providing security, we have to integrate civil and military components, working with partners where partners are available, based on a clear reading of local dynamics. Local dynamics are very much important. We cannot arrive there. Here we are, Europeans, without being very much aware of what's happening, which are the sociological structure of the people. And we have to support a single political strategy. In Libya, we are paying the price of our divisions. When I came here, it was clear one member state was supporting one side, the other member state was supporting the other side, and now both member states are out, and the Turks and Russians are taking control of the country. So they're doing a lot of acronyms, PESCO, CARD, EDF, EPF. It's even difficult for me to understand all of them, no? CARD, what does it mean, CARD? Coordinated Annual Defense Review. Good, what does it mean for ordinary people? The point is not to get lost in the process, but demonstrate to our citizens that we are making real progress in building an Europe that protects. And once again, we have a fast worsening security environment, and we have tools to face it. The problem is to have the political will to use them.
Thank you. Thank you so much for this. I think this is really extensively covered the external challenges the EU is facing, the internal challenges as well, and to this overall goal of acting quickly to match the expectations of citizens. So I know that you have an extremely busy agenda and you can't stay for much longer, but if you'll allow, I'll just ask a very short question to give a positive, perhaps, end also past the challenges. And it's related to something that you have spoken about before, and that is that when it comes to making the EU a truly global player, we have more levers than we think. And that's a philosophy I think that we're also taking into account in this Engage project. Could you give us just a few thoughts on which levers you believe are underutilized and how the Union might be able to use those levers strategically?
Well, we have a lot of ways to exert influence. We have much more than we think. And certainly we should avoid a sense of fatalism that we Europeans are doomed and slide into weakness and irrelevance. Well, this is not written on marble. We have a lot of ways to exist because we can influence. But we need to overcome two obstacles. One is mentality. Mentality is a reluctance to think in power political terms. Many other actors are using power politics every day. And the other one is a problem of organization, where we let every policy area develop on its own, in isolation, working in silos, divorced from an overall political strategy. And my post was created in order to avoid that, in order to coordinate the foreign policy of the member states with the foreign tools that the Commission has. And there is a certain tendency, I can tell you, to work on silos. Trade is trade, cooperation is cooperation, partnership is partnership. This has consequences for the effectiveness of our foreign policy. Each area should be working together with the others. Well, in a single state, it also happens, but much less. But here there is a divorce from an overall political strategy. And once again, the problem is that it's not that we lack means of influence. We are the world's biggest provider of development aid to start with. We are the biggest market with the largest group of affluent customers, the biggest share of a high-level middle class. We have the world's largest stock of foreign investment. Take the case of Russia. Foreign direct investment in Russia, 75% is European Union. 3/4 of all foreign direct investment in Russia, it's our investment. We make rules that companies around the world adopt because they want to operate in our markets. We don't have to force them. They do that voluntarily because they want to operate in our market, which is a big market. We have 4 times as many diplomats as the US or China. Yes, pulling together all diplomatic services of all European member states. But it's not the same thing, you will tell me. It certainly is not the same thing to adding up all the diplomatic services that have a single diplomatic service. We have 4 times more people. We are not 4 times more powerful. Our problem is fragmentation and silo thinking. We don't coordinate enough. And we are reluctant to think that our decision on trade and investment or on 5G also have a geopolitical component and effect. One of my elements of my job is to say that this decision will have geopolitical effects. Please consider that from a geopolitical perspective. There are many trade agreements that should be considered as more than trade agreements, as part of association agreements. Theoretically, they are. In practical terms, they are not, but not enough. Another thing is that here in Europe, we have been working hard during decades on depoliticizing everything, because it was the best way to overcome division among us. If this was the purpose, if this was the objective, we got a spectacular success. We, European Unions, from the point of view of overcoming divisions among us, my God, have a look at the past history of the last, how many years? Less than 200 years. The Prussian War, 150 years, 1.5 centuries. Nothing at the scale of the humankind history. Look, if this was the purpose, success. But the history don't stop. And now to realize that we live in a much, much more controversial world. I can say a carnivore world. And we look as someone that only eats vegetables. And to defend our island of postmodern thinking, we need to be ready to play power politics. I said that before, come to that idea. We need to learn to play power politics. We see the connection between issues, to link policy fields to build leverage. I am not saying that we should behave like others. I can put you some examples of linking, connecting fields. You're not doing that? Okay, then you will not have vaccines. I'm not going to say that we have to use this kind of blackmailing. To link things doesn't mean to blackmail. But if we want to build leverage, we have to link policy fields. And I see a geopolitical awakening in Europe. And I am sure that we can show in concrete cases how to use the levers we have for more political purposes. This is the only way of showing that we are not just a principal actor, but also a powerful actor. Because if you are very much principled, but you are not powerful, that's nice, but it doesn't change. Last point, I really believe we need to bring the world of ideas and world of policy making close together. I started saying that at the beginning. I spent my life trying to bridge the policy making world and the world of ideas, of thinking. And on that, universities and think tanks have an important role to play by challenging the politically conventional discourse, providing evidence. Sometimes we say things that are not true, and we construct policy without evidence supporting it. That's what why I'm so happy this consortium exists. And don't know a lot about you. I would like to know more and better which is the output. Thanks to the consortium. We need more links among researchers, among yourself, and more bridges with policymakers. I wait for your support. Thank you.
Thank you so much for these messages. We have a lot of work to do as a consortium, that is clear, and we are carrying these messages over to make this bridge between academia and policymaking. That is indeed one of our missions. We'll be sure to keep you and your office informed of our progress as we continue. So thank you so much for joining us. It's really been an honor and a pleasure to listen to your remarks today. Thank you.
Thank you. Goodbye.
Bye.
Stay safe and work hard.
Thank you, will do.
Thank you.
Okay, so thank you, High Representative and Vice President of the Commission. It was wonderful to hear and listen to this last keynote remarks. Thank you, Marie, for moderating the discussion and the conversation so skillfully with the High Representative. And with this, I think we can close today's event. We have had quite an intense set of conversations, 2 panels, 3 keynotes, 2 High Representatives. So I think there have been a lot of ideas and topics that have come out of our discussion. I think that was part of our objective, to start this intellectual support that High Representative Borrell was speaking about, to start the intellectual debate and to start covering ground in our intellectual support for a more global Europe. We'll continue doing that. We will be walking this road for another 3 years and a half. Our idea is precisely to bridge the intellectual community with the policy impact and the policy-making community. And in fact, one of the things which is inherent to this project, as Professor Wouters was mentioning this morning, is about the linking different policy issues and different elements of the European Union into to a more coherent, effective, and sustainable global Europe. With that, I want to also thank Leuven University, the Catholic University of Leuven, who has put together this wonderful event, and all the back office and support, as well as Carnegie for its communication of the event and other communicative matters. Without more to add, thank you all for attending. Please follow us through the web page, Twitter, and sign up to our events. And I hope we can continue this conversation, and that will last another few years. Thank you very much.